Well, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is New Hanover County Schools Calendar Committee presentation, May 21st, and we'll begin with our welcome from our Calendar Committee Chairperson, Mr. Bo Ure. Mr. Bo Ure, we need to unmute you.
Of your time.
Sorry, we're having just a few technical difficulties. All right, I think we can hear you now, Mr. Bo Ure.
We're good?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Sorry for the delay. As I said twice before, but for the first time, as far as your ears are concerned, I want to thank everybody for giving so freely of their time these past few weeks. I know it's been a big request. I definitely think that our end results will be worth it. And for the people watching at home, I did want to clarify something because it's been coming up time and again. Our job for this committee is to discuss our calendar, and there's some confusion about the calendar and the schedule. We don't have the information right now with regards to what our 2020-2021 school year will look like. As soon as we get that guidance with regards to staggered starts, staggered schedules, how we can maintain safe social distances, we will definitely share it. But the purposes of this committee are to find out exactly when school will begin, and Dr. Smith has some very good draft calendars, and we can get started.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bo Ure. Appreciate that. And so, as Mr. Bo Ure said, welcome and thank you to you all for being here. And we definitely realize how valuable your time is, and that you surely could be giving that time to something else. So we really do appreciate your input and the time that you're giving to this process. So I just want to go over the purpose of the meeting for today, which would be to review the draft calendars that we have as they are, and then to record your feedback, and then to gather information to be able to update the draft calendars so that we have calendars that we can post and we can share directly with families to get some additional feedback. And so now what we can do is just to give you a little bit of an update from the town halls. Most of you probably heard that recently we had 2 town halls to gather information about the restart calendar and the year-round calendar. At the town hall for Snipes and Freeman, which took a look at the restart calendar, it seemed like a central theme there was around school safety. And, families had concerns, as Mr. Boyer stated, about how students would come back to school. And again, we will share that information as soon as we have it available. We did get some really good feedback from the administration and staff, and we've made some slight tweaks to that calendar as well. And we'll share that and again, gather additional feedback. And then last night we had the Coddington Eaton town hall meeting, and we had about 262 families that tuned into that or that were on that session at the peak point. And we overviewed 2 draft calendars, and what we gathered from that kind of as a general theme was that a lot of families are really interested in the original calendar. So this afternoon, we will actually be taking a look at 3 draft year-round calendars. The 2 that were shared last night with just some slight tweaks based on the feedback we received last night. And then also the original calendar that was board approved, with the additions to ensure that it's compliant with new calendar laws or with the updated calendar laws. Mr. Bowyer, is there anything that you would like to add in reference to the 2 town hall meetings?
No, I thought we had very good parent feedback and very good participation. I definitely appreciate their input. As I said last night, our decisions, will take take that guidance into consideration. But student safety has got to be our top priority.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Smith, this is Bernice Johnson with New Hanover County Council of PTAs.
Yes, ma'am.
I did have two comments about the town hall. For the Freeman town hall, do we know how many parents from Freeman were actually on that call?
Um,
Um, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know exactly how many parents. I
Mhm.
do know how many people that signed in, and we did have 48 families to sign in. Now that could have been staff, and it could have been folks from Snipes as well. But we did have 48 families to sign in for that call.
Okay, because I just had some concerns. The news had reached out to Mr. Boyer, and then he reached out to me. And when I reached out to the administration, the assistant principal, Miss Willis, she said she didn't see any of her parents on the call. So that was a concern to me, that to make sure that those parents are getting the information, and that Zoom calls may not be the best way to communicate with those schools. And then my other comment was, there were people making comments on the YouTube page, and just to make sure you were aware of that, because I'm not sure if those comments were getting addressed as the meeting was happening live.
Well, and I appreciate that, and you're exactly right. They were not. And then what happens that we've since found out is that when the session is over and it closes, then those comments are no longer available. So what we will do, and of course, this very much is a process. Once we have kind of landed on the drafts, we can send those out for feedback, and that feedback can come in any form. It surely can come in written form, um, and it can be an email to me or anyone on the committee. It can be a phone call to me or anyone on the committee. So we'll have conversations with those administrators to make sure that we are um, reaching families through the avenues that are most convenient for them. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So at this time, what I'd like to do, make sure I'm on the right page, is to go ahead and for us to start looking at some draft calendars and to get your feedback. And you can definitely populate your feedback in the chat. You can unmute yourself and share that. And we're going to capture it however you share it with us. And so this is the draft traditional calendar. It has 173 student days, 16 teacher work days, 11 holidays, 10 vacation days, and 5 remote learning days. And I'll click here to see if we can get a larger. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me back up. Gotten some feedback that it is not showing on the screen, which exactly it is not. There we go. So we're going to back up just a little bit, and I apologize. Sometimes you can get ahead of yourself. I know that's hard to believe, but sometimes you can. So again, to say we have the first calendar, which is the traditional calendar, 173 student days, 16 teacher work days, 11 holidays, 10 vacation days, and 5 remote learning days. And what I'm going to do is click on the link so we can get a larger view of that. Hopefully you can see that well. Make sure I can see the chat. Right. And so here we see that school would start for students, for staff on August 10th. And then for students, the first day would be August 17th. And as we all know, based on our last meeting, that is what is prescribed in law. We, of course, would have Labor Day holiday, and we can see where the interim reports would be due. And again, these dates can be adjusted in terms of the interim date. What can't be adjusted, of course, is the date for which we start, and of course, any holidays. End of grading period would occur on October 2nd. And then you can see that it's followed by a teacher work day. In November, we would have teacher work day on elections day. We'd have veterans holiday. We'd have our Thanksgiving holiday. And we would have a vacation day on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And then in December, last student day would be, last student day would be December 17th. The 18th would be a teacher work day. '21st and '22nd are undesignated teacher work days. 23rd, 29th, 30th, and 31st are annual leave days or vacation days. And then the 24th, 25th, and 28th are holidays. This is the symbol that we've created. And when I say we, I really mean Cherry has created for remote learning days. And right now they are all in the first week, the first full week of January. And we've had some discussion about how we use this really to benefit our secondary schools in terms of grade recovery or maybe pre-teaching or pre-learning opportunities for the second semester. These days, however, would be considered as a part of the the second semester. And the reason for that is because if they are considered part of the first semester, then they would be the days that we would have to test. So this would technically be the beginning of the the second semester of school. So end of grading period would be March 4th, with the teacher work day following that. There was quite a bit of discussion last year about the importance of teacher work days following the grading period to provide teachers with the opportunity to do those things necessary to prepare their report cards. And so we've tried to pair that in these calendars. Spring break would be April 5th through the 9th. And what we're going to see is in the other draft calendars, spring break is positioned slightly different. We can make the decision to maintain it where it is, or we can make the decision to move it if that is what we choose. Or the other calendars can surely make adjustments to align themselves with where we've positioned spring break. The last day of school would be May 27th. We typically have a day buffer here so that high schools have this time to prepare for high school graduation, finalize grades, get to ensure that all the graduates have everything that they need so that we can invite them to graduation. And then the high school graduations would be on this Saturday before Memorial Day holiday. Now, this is what we have traditionally and historically done in terms of the sequence, of course, not the dates. There is the opportunity if we wanted to see something different that we surely could do that. And so when we start discussing, that we can have that conversation. Last day for staff would be June 4th. So this is the traditional calendar. And of course, this is a draft. So at this time, I'd love your feedback. So I'll stop talking and provide you with the opportunity to provide some feedback on the calendar. If you want to use your chat box, you're welcome, or you surely can just unmute yourself and share your comments that way.
Dr. Smith, can you just scroll down to April?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's Easter Monday. Okay, yeah. All right. That's what I wanted to see. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Smith, I think this is a really good calendar. I think it does a lot of what we were trying to accomplish last year with the committee. There was a lot of disappointment when we couldn't do that. With the law changed, this is innovative, it's creative. I think it will be met with a positive reception at the board. At least that's my hope. I think it's a very good calendar.
Thank you for that feedback. Others, questions, discussion?
On behalf of middle schools, I think we certainly would like it. I would assume high schools do too in terms of the semesters before the winter break. The only question I had, and maybe I was confused last week, as far as the remote learning days, we have 5 on the calendar. I thought I heard that we had to have 10, but it is only 5. Is that correct?
So it is 5. Where the additional calendars come in, additional days come in, is if there is a designation of, and I apologize for not being completely clear on this, is either a state of emergency or disaster, and we miss so many days as a result of that, then we have the ability to add additional remote learning days so that we don't find ourselves in a position of having to make those days up. And so, great example of that would have been Florence. We could have transitioned to remote learning with Florence and not have the issue or the challenges of finding the time to make those days up at the end of the school year.
Yeah, outside of that question, I mean, I think it looks great with what I've communicated to middle school principals.
Well, and Charlie, I'll say publicly to you, thank you for all the feedback that you've gotten from middle school principals, and that has helped to inform this calendar as well. Any additional discussion about their traditional calendar? And again, you surely can populate your comments in the chat. We want to make sure that we not miss anything. All right. If not, then what we'll do, because we do have quite a few calendars this evening, is transition to our next calendar. And what I'll say is, so we're going to share this as a draft. We're going to make this publicly available to all. We're still gathering feedback. But if you think of something after the fact, please do not hesitate to share. So the next calendar that we're going to take a look at is the restart calendar. And again, we shared this the other night with families, but we will again share it out with principals directly and have them push it far and wide so that we can get feedback from those families. This calendar has 179 days. There are 7 teacher work days, 11 holidays, 10 vacation days, as you can see, and then 5 remote learning days, which pretty much will be standard in all of our calendars. And then here they have 3 professional development days, and that is flexibility, again, given to restart schools that it's not present with other schools. Let's take a larger view. Here's something unique to their calendar is that they have chosen to strategically position their remote learning days on Wednesdays. And in speaking with the folks that are connected with the calendar, what it was shared with me was it was positioned on a Wednesday to provide that opportunity for that Monday, Tuesday instruction, then the transition to Wednesday to build capacity with children, and then the Thursday, Friday, students would come back to school, and this would be to assure that children understood what they were learning and that they would get the support that they need. So they very intentionally placed it in the middle of the week. So it wasn't to disrupt the continuity of learning, but to provide that scaffolded support so that they could maximize what was coming on those Wednesdays. Students would not be overwhelmed by this. So their calendar begins. For teachers, the first day would be July 28th, and their first day for students would be on August 4th. Their integrating period would be September the 25th, and then their first intersession would be September 28th through the 30th. Oh, excuse me, it goes far longer than that. It would start on it would start on September the 28th. It would actually end on October the 9th. I apologize for that. You can see where the remote learning days would be placed in September and October. And then also understand there's flexibility around this. If, for some reason there was inclement weather, we could transition these to student days, identify different days as remote learning days. And then also within our calendars, we're building in enough time in terms of a cushion that we're going to try to do our best unless, we find ourselves in a situation of losing a tremendous amount of time and far exceeding the additional remote learning days that we can add, not having to make up time. Again, similar to the traditional calendar, you have the election day on November 3rd. You have your holiday, Veterans Holiday on November the 11th, and then same dates for Thanksgiving break. Here, slightly different. Students would, their last day would be on December the 8th. So that is when, 18th. So that is when the end of the grading period would occur. Also here, students would return on January the 5th. There's a remote learning day placed in February, and then there's also one placed in March. Now, again, you will notice that their intersessions fall March 22nd. And students would not return back to school till April 6th. This looks very different than the previous calendar. And then students, their last day would be on June 10th, with teachers' last day on June 14th. So questions, discussion about restart.
Dr. Smith, I have a question. How are the other 5 remote learning days are going to be used? Can you say that again, please?
So the remote learning days here, so essentially the days have been placed in a way probably that could be best categorized as practice days for remote learning. So they're in this calendar, they're strategically separated so that children are provided the tools, provided the resources for remote learning. Teachers would plan, build capacity, build understanding around that on Monday and Tuesday. Students would go home Wednesday, operate remotely with their teachers, of course, supporting them remotely, and then they would come back Thursday and Friday for follow-up. So here it's very different than it was in the traditional calendar. The Restart schools have chosen this model because they believe that it best meets the needs of their students. But the purpose of remote learning days essentially are the same. It's to provide children with the practice and the opportunity to engage in remote learning in a very effective way, supported by their teachers throughout the year. So if we do find ourselves in another situation like we are this year, this is not going to be new or novel to our children. It is not going to be new or novel to our teachers.
Okay, thank you. And the other five remote days, how did you say that are going to be used?
So the additional remote learning days would only come as a result of a declaration of an emergency or a disaster. So if we found ourselves in that situation and we were out of school for an extended period of time, then we would be able to add additional remote learning days to the calendar so that we then would not have to make up those days. Very similar to this year. So we are maintaining our current calendars this year and in providing remote learning. So there is not the expectation that we have to do makeup days. You know, last year with Florence, we were missing so many instructional hours. We weren't meeting the 185-day requirement, nor were we meeting the 1,025. So there was the expectation that districts would make up time. Um, except for the time that was forgiven. But this would allow us to have a plan that we know in advance, as opposed to waiting for an act of the state legislature to say to schools, no, you don't have to be in compliance with school calendar laws or required hours this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions or discussion around Restart? And definitely, if we have some of our Restart principals on the call, or a representative, would love to hear from you folks.
This is Bernice Johnson, New Hanover
Yes, ma'am.
County Council of PTAs. Just a question: did the administrative think that the restart days in the middle of the week? I'm sorry, the remote learning days in the middle of the week would be disruptive to working parents? Was that considered?
I do not know. I haven't asked that question, but I definitely can take that question back. I'll make sure the chair records that, and we can get a response to that. But I do not know if that was a consideration.
Dr. Smith, this is Rachel Manning, Principal
Oh,
at Snipes. I can
yes, ma'am.
answer that a little bit. Some of the parents, we haven't talked to all of our parents, but some of our parents have really expressed especially our younger students, our K2 students, really needing that extra support with the remote learning. We all were just kind of thrust into it, and kids were just given a device. So, and the parents that I have spoken to, they're okay with the Wednesdays because they feel like their students will be better prepared um, with the teaching up front on the Monday and Tuesday. Go home with the expectations of what to do. But I can further survey parents if you would like for me to.
Well, I appreciate that, Ms. Manning. And we want to build calendars that, are definitely responsive to the needs of our students. But, at the point I think Ms. Johnson has made, we want to make sure that they're conducive for our parents as well. So I think as much feedback as we can gather from parents and staff about our calendars and whether, they're meeting our needs as a whole, all groups, students, staff, and our parents, I think that would be really helpful.
We can do that, and that's not a problem.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or discussion? If not, we will transition to our next calendar. And so here what we actually have 3 year-round calendars. I've labeled them A, B, and C, just for me to keep them straight. Calendar A, year-round calendar A, is actually the current board approved calendar with the additional 5 days added and the remote learning days identified within the calendar. And so I think at the beginning, I shared with you there was quite a bit of feedback from parents from last night who expressed an interest in maintaining the original calendar. And so we wanted to bring back a draft for folks to look at because we did not have a draft last night that was based upon the original calendar. I had gotten feedback from folks that we were looking more toward delaying the start, but there were, in my opinion, based on the folks who were present, a significant number of folks who wanted to see the original calendar. And so we now have taken that, modified it to make it in compliance with the new calendar requirements. So this calendar actually has 181 student days, 8 teacher work days, 11 holidays, 10 vacation days, and 5 remote learning days. We'll make it a little bit larger. Yes, sir.
Trying to be respectful of everybody's time, and I definitely heard the same feedback you did last night. Um, and I definitely like our year-round stakeholders to jump in. I still have a lot of reservations about that. I know what the parents want. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of uncertainty. I have staffing concerns. Should we choose to start the school year where we originally discussed it? And there was a reason that we didn't offer that start date last night. And I think that reason was that uncertainty and those safety concerns with our students. Unless there's a strong will from this committee to pursue this calendar, I just have concerns about moving forward with it. So I'd really love to hear from our year-round stakeholders.
Well, and I appreciate that. And yes, so essentially, very quickly, you see that the start date for students would be on the 15th, with teachers returning on July the 10th. So students on the 15th. And then again, the changes here would be the designation of the 5 remote learning days that first full week in January. And then your end date would be on June 10th for students. And so at this time, I'll because nothing really else has changed too much. We did have to take teacher work days out of the calendar to accommodate the 5 additional days because again, as you all know, we're limited to 215. So at this point, I welcome that feedback on this calendar because again, not a lot of significant changes here except for the remote learning days and the removal of 5 teacher work days. So from our year-round stakeholders, I'd welcome your feedback.
This is Bernice. I'm not a year-round stakeholder, but what I heard on the meeting last night is that yes, they did want to maintain that calendar, but that want was based on also wanting to know what safety measures would be implemented. So I'm not sure they truly wanted it. I think they did want it, but it was going to be based on what safety measures were implemented in going back to school.
And I think you make a great point, and I tried to highlight last night that regardless of our start date, regardless of whether it's in July or it's in August, we're not going to bring children into buildings that we believe are unsafe. We're not going to bring staff into buildings that we believe are unsafe. Safety is paramount. Um, and um, and so I agree with you that folks want that information. Um, and it may be that we make a decision about a calendar and things change. And so, the calendar changes. But I appreciate you highlighting that point. Folks are interested in starting in July, but they want to start July as long as it's safe in July. Any other feedback? And what we are planning to do, because right now we do have 3 draft calendars, and it seemed to be a strong interest last night, is to get feedback on all 3 drafts. So we are planning a parent survey specific to this. For all other calendars, we find ourselves kind of toggling between more than one draft, then we could do that for those groups as well. Right now with year round, we do have 3 drafts that we're looking at. So what we'll do is go on to the second draft. And so this is year round B. And so with this calendar, there are 179 student days, 10 teacher work days, 11 holidays, 10 vacation days, and 5 remote learning days. Take a look at a larger view. In here, what's significant is when teachers start. Teachers do start in July, and we know one concern that we have with staff is that if they're not able to start in July, then they're not going to receive that full paycheck for the month of July. And so this calendar does allow for that. And then first day for students would be August 4th. Here, the remote learning days are dispersed throughout the calendar. And actually what we're planning on doing in revising this draft is actually putting them through this first week. And I apologize, I thought I actually had that edited calendar. I looked at it, saw it, but obviously it's not the one. So we're looking at moving all the remote learning days to this very first week in January. That is feedback that we received last night. So before we send that out, we will make that change. And then the end of the school year, last day for students would be June 10th. Last day for staff would be June 14th. And so I welcome feedback on this version of the year-round calendar.
Dr. Smith,
Yes.
This is Heather Byers from the Year Round. I also agree with the remote days as well. I think that would be good for the January start.
And they also would line with the traditional. And so if we were planning significant staff development, then it wouldn't have to be piecemeal for our year-round teachers.
Correct. And I like that as well.
Additional feedback, questions?
Dr. Smith, it's Mary Hazel. Does this meet the 4515 or is this a modified calendar?
This would be the modified calendar. And so essentially with the modified calendar, as long as we start before the previously designated date by the state, or either we end after the previously designated end date by the state, then we are within compliance of maintaining a modified calendar.
Thank you.
Yes.
I also want to speak up for the pay as far as the staff goes, that I think that's very important. So I do like the days at the end of July for them to receive their check.
Yes.
So thank you.
You're most welcome. Okay, we'll go back and take a look at the next calendar. So this is year-round C. Well, sorry. Yeah, year-round C. This calendar has 181 days, 8 teacher work days, 11 holidays, 10 vacation days, 5 remote learning days. Take a look at a larger version of that. And in this calendar, you can see that teachers start on August 6th and that students start on August 12th. And I would say that's probably the most significant change here. And of course, the grading periods and things of that nature will kind of fall out based on that. And then again, remote learning days would all be located this first full week in January. We end the semester on December the 17th. And then the school year would not end until June 22nd. And then staff would work until June 24th. So any feedback around this calendar?
Dr. Smith, I think the concern with this one is going to be the pay
Mhm.
for the July part. You know, if you look at all three, I think this is just my personal opinion, but I think draft A or B looks better because draft A is still the concern of the safety starting as that we, you know, like we were supposed to, that I am also very concerned about. If you take draft B, it's a later start, which I think gives us some time to see where we are and have some more guidance and guidelines from the district and what that will look like. And they have the pay. And I think you're still getting your year-round calendar
Yes.
overall.
And all of these meet the requirement for modified. Where they're shortened a little bit would be in terms of their intercession.
Correct.
Yes.
Does the first one meet the requirement that would work for Sunset or the 4515 since they're not modified?
None of the calendars are 4515. No.
Oh, none of them are. So Sunset's just out. There's traditional then.
So we still have quite a few calendars to develop. And Sunset Park's calendar would be one of those,
Okay.
if that was the decision that they chose to go in that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then just to clarify for option B or calendar B and C, this would sort of keep that grandfathered status for what 21, 22, so they could go back to kind of the calendar that they've been used to. Is that correct?
Yes. So all three options, A, B, and C. That was
I
kind
think
of the non-starter.
Yeah, I think that was a big concern that I heard as well. From those two, I like B myself.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? And again, our plan is to, once I clean up option B just a little bit, and I apologize that I again thought I popped in the right draft, but obviously not. Once we clean those up just a little bit, we're going to make these available to families, and then we're going to solicit that feedback because we have more than one draft.
Thank you for all your hard work, Dr. Smith and Sherry and your committee. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys being here, and your feedback is invaluable. And so kind of the last thing we've got to talk about, and you know, we've got plenty of time, so we can spend as much time, and we can surely go back if we need to. We do still have additional calendars to develop. We have our pre-K calendar, which will be based upon our traditional. We have our pre-K restart calendar, which will be based upon the restart calendar. We do have the Sunset Park calendar, and for Sunset Park at this point, you know, based on the legal guidance that we've received, there is the option of the 45-15 year round or the traditional calendar. And we'll be supporting those folks and talking with staff and any of the families that want to be a part of that conversation about what those options are. We're currently working with Lake Forest Academy to develop their calendar, which will be a 45-15 with additional extended learning opportunities for students. And then we're working with our early colleges to develop their calendars. And this year we're looking at CTech and WEX actually having the same calendar. So CTech and WEX would be on the same calendar. And then we're looking at developing a calendar for Isaac Bear Early College High School. So when we meet again, we would anticipate at that point having all of those calendars developed. We would also anticipate having received the feedback around year round and any feedback that we need to gather around restart, and then also the traditional calendar as well. So questions that you might have. Anything that we missed?
I'm sorry to keep asking questions. Did we
I
have
appreciate it. I appreciate it, Charlie.
Did we have any idea about attendance? If you know, what do we have? The first 10 or 20 days of the year is certainly important for staffing numbers and things like that, would we have any idea if there were remote learning days within those first 20 days of the year and somebody's interacting remotely, would that count as an attendance day for not necessarily for the student, but for the school?
They actually do count as attendance days for students, and that's why we're currently, as a district, working on a remote learning plan so that we can build out those systems that will allow us to record student attendance. So even though we show them differently in our count, when we are talking about 181 student days, that's really 186 student days. It just happens that 5 of them are remote. Because this is so new to us, that's why we break it out that way. But that is 186 student days, so 186 days of student learning. 5 of them are just supported remotely by our teachers. Anything that we've missed? Any questions, comments, anything you want us to think about or consider?
For teacher work days during the year that are sort of sprinkled in, I'm kind of looking at like the November 3rd election. I think there were more with the traditional calendar. Is there any reason that day couldn't be a remote learning day for a student? I know you can have them concurrently with a teacher work day and a remote learning day for a student. It doesn't, for the teacher, it doesn't necessarily matter one way or the other, but I didn't know if we wanted to have additional remote learning days in a calendar or not.
So we can't go beyond the 5. So if we wanted to have 4 in January and then have this one in November, on November the 3rd, we definitely do have that flexibility.
But five is the number.
5 is the number, unless we have a designation of either a disaster or an emergency, and we missed a significant amount of time, then we could, in essence, identify 5 additional remote learning days. So we wouldn't have to make that time up. What I would offer to you is that this is still new and novel to us. Part of the discussion that we had, and it began actually last year, about that week in January was, we have a need, and this presents itself as an opportunity. And it's really around secondary schools and building in the opportunity to kind of move away from credit recovery to maybe grade recovery. And then also, the opportunity to do some pre-teaching and some pre-learning for students in very intentional type of ways, and then also that opportunity for some acceleration. So it would almost be as if the remote learning days serve multiple purposes that filled a gap that we have had as a school or as educators, and weren't able to fill before now because we did not have the calendar flexibility. Now, a little bit of an experiment in terms of that, but I know we tried to address that with the calendar we proposed last year. This year's calendar flexibility allows us to do this, to still do that same exact thing. Other questions, concerns, comments, anything that we missed? And what I'll say is, of course, all of you have my email address, but please do not hesitate to call me, to reach out via email. If there's something that you think of, if there's something that's brought to your attention, we want to get this right. We want to make sure that these calendars are responsive and support student learning in the ways that we need them to. We want to make sure that they are very friendly to our families and that they are supportive of our staff. We know there's going to be a lot of professional learning next year. We want to make sure that our calendars support that. And then also allow for the greatest amount of flexibility for you as principals and instructional leaders and in your roles to meet the needs and the things that you've been tasked with. And so if there's not anything else, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bowyer to close.
Dr. Smith. Hopefully everybody can hear me the first time this time. Thank you all very much again for participating. It is going to be a year unlike any other, but I think with this calendar, we're getting it off to a good start. We've been talking a lot the last couple nights about all we've missed. And when you look at it, it's 25% of the last 2 years, our students will not have been in their buildings. So coming up with an innovative calendar like this to meet them where they are when they get back is really good work. It's greatly appreciated. And I appreciate all of our stakeholders giving so freely their time. Enjoy your weekend and stay out of the rain. Happy Memorial Day to everybody.